So for the second core learning outcome, I'm going to start by addressing the first learning goal, which is students will identify the historical and religious, cultural, literary, theological, and other contextual considerations necessary for understanding the biblical themes of covenant and Messiah found in Old and New Testaments. So how I have done this, obviously, I have learned about the historical and cultural context of the stories in the Old and New Testaments throughout this course. Through exploring the world behind the text, of the text, and in front of the text, I've grown in my understanding of everything that you need to take into account when trying to comprehend the biblical text, when it was written, who was in power in Israel, and the political state of the region, from which point of view was it written, how were the original Hebrew words translated, what did they originally mean, when did they get translated, and did the translation serve a certain purpose politically or ideologically for the church. So I have learned to take all of these things into account when reading the Bible. And then an example of work of mine that dives into the historical and cultural context of the biblical stories is my pack-back question from when we learned about the Genesis story and the Numa Elish. And I asked about why did the Hebrews creation story involve one God as opposed to many. And then I kind of dove into how Genesis is an act of resistance and a counter-narrative to the story of Marduk and the Numa Elish, and talked about how I wasn't sure, and I was wondering what brought about monotheism and why that was part of the act of resistance. So through that, I show my understanding of the political, cultural, and historical context of when Genesis is written in opposition to the Babylonians because it was written during the Babylonian exile, and opposing the creation story of Enuma Elish. And then in my question, I also address how Genesis is fundamentally different from other forms of religious texts and teaching at the time because it introduces monotheism. So this achieves the first learning goal of the learning outcome number 2.